All right. Go ahead and call this meeting to order. We'll start off with quick roll call. McKee here, Schultz
Here.
Behrenkamp
Here.
Nichols
Here.
Perfect. And stand and invite everyone to join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you. Oath of office for our new colleague.
Would
Would you like to come down? And
Ooh, I gotta get in front of everybody too.
Sorry, you gotta do this officially. So if you could repeat after me.
I will.
I, Dean Farrington,
I, Dean Behrenkamp,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
to support
to support
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
and to discharge faithfully
and to discharge faithfully
the duties of the office of council member
the duties of the office of council member
for the city of Corcoran,
for the city of Corcoran,
Minnesota,
Minnesota,
and to do so with my best
and to do so with my best
judgment and ability,
judgment and ability.
so help me God.
So help me God. Thank you.
I'll officially welcome aboard, Dean.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
It's an honor.
All right. Agenda approval. Do we have anything from staff? Any changes?
Nothing from staff.
Anything from council? All right. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Commission representatives, we have Mark Lanterman and Alicia Hoffman, from Planning and Parks and Trails respectively.
I think Alicia might be joining us via phone.
Okay, sounds good. We'll go right into open forum. For items not on tonight's agenda, I don't know if we have anyone that signed up or is online that wants to.
Nobody in advance, Mr. Mayor?
Anyone who's joining us online can press *9 if they're joining us via phone. Otherwise, you can press under the reactions tab on a computer or a tablet. You can go ahead and press the raise your hand button, and I can recognize you to speak. At this time, Mayor, no one is raising their hand for open forum.
Okay. And we'll go right on to 7A, which is police officer oath for Josh Lawson.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Mayor, council, and guests. Tonight's a special night for the Corcoran Police Department, so we're happy that all of you could join us. We'd like to start by recognizing one of our newest police officers, Josh Lawson. He's here with his family, his wife Lisa, and son Connor, and we're proud to welcome you to the department, Josh, as you're continuing your career in public service. He came from us from the Sherburne County Jail and also served as a Clearwater firefighter. He just started with the police department in May, and then he just recently, during the middle of last month, completed the direct supervision portion of his field training program. And we would like to formally recognize him with his official oath of office tonight, and his family will have them come forward to pin his badge after he completes his oath. So.
That's good.
I'll have you repeat after me as well. I, Josh Lawson,
I, Josh Lawson,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
and that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
of police officer within and for
of the police officer within and for
the city of Corcoran
the city of Corcoran
and the state of Minnesota.
and the state of Minnesota.
On my honor,
On my honor,
I will never betray my badge,
I will never betray my badge,
my integrity,
my character,
or the public trust,
or the public trust,
and I will always have
and I will always have
the courage
the
to hold myself
and others accountable
for our actions,
for our actions,
and I will always
always uphold
and I will always uphold
the Constitution,
the Constitution,
my community,
my community,
and the agency I serve.
and the agency I serve.
So help me God.
So help me God. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
The second police department employee that we'd like to recognize tonight is Peter Eckenberg. Pete started with the police department 6 years ago in August, and he came to us from the Carver County Sheriff's Office. Many of you have probably seen Officer Eckenberg during his time working in the community and overseeing some of our larger events like Night to Unite. So I'm sure that most of you have probably met him or interacted with him at some point or another. During the past year, we held a police sergeant promotional process, and Officer Eckenberg was selected as the Corcoran Police Department's first ever police sergeant. So tonight, we'd like to welcome Sergeant Eckenberg to his new role and ask his family to come forward and pin his new promotional badge on him. So congratulations, Pete. Kelly, come forward.
All right. Congrats to both of you guys. Give everyone a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one. All righty. Yeah, apparently. Understandable. All right, we'll move on to consent agenda, which consists of items 8A through 8G. Does anyone have anything they want to pull?
No.
All good? All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items 8A through 8G.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, okay.
Aye.
Gotcha.
I was reading, sorry.
No problem. No planning business, so we'll move on to 10. In record time, I think, 8 minutes. Northeast Corcoran Water Project.
And Mayor and Council, I skipped through this at the beginning of the meeting, I apologize. Usually when we do the agenda, I talk through the public comment opportunities, so.
My bad,
I'll do that now. We do have a public comment opportunity at unfinished business and new business. Right now, the two items for public comment opportunity would be the Northeast Corcoran Water Project, as well as the commissioner appointment process. So anyone interested in now, we have no one in the audience at this point yet, and anybody online, Jessica, if you want to walk through that.
Yes, anyone online, you can press star 9 if you're joining us via phone. Otherwise, if you're joining us via tablet or computer or other electronic device, you can click reactions and raise your hand, and we can recognize you at that point.
I don't believe anybody in the audience is interested at this point.
And Mayor, no one is raising their hand at this point.
Is there a copy of what you're discussing?
I can get
There
you
should
a
be
copy
one
of the
there.
agenda.
Great. Anyone pop up on there?
No.
Okay. Then we will go right into the discussion or the presentation.
Sounds good. And we have Kent Torvey. Kent, are you there?
Virtual Kent. That's too loud. This maybe?
Kent, are you there?
Kent, I'm sorry, we're not able to hear you.
What's the setting on there, your audio?
Same as
Just a
Kent.
second, Kent, we have to switch your settings up.
Kent, can you hear us? Are you able to?
It's under audio. The same thing happened in planning commission.
Kent, can you?
Can we call him?
Steve? Why don't you come back here with the, we do have a backup plan. We're calling up the lefty, the righty, actually. He's on 7919.
Oh, he is. There we go. I'll go ahead and,
There's a different Kent.
yes. Kent, you can press *6 to unmute yourself on a phone. There we go.
How was that?
Gotcha, a little echoey, but we got you.
Yeah, Kent, we can hear, I think your computer, you can mute your computer. Turn the volume off your computer.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Sort of.
No.
Maybe, does he have headphones?
Well, at this point, I don't want to be a distraction, and Steve's completely capable to run with it.
Sounds good.
All right, move forward. So Steve, you would mind just
So
introducing?
I'll move myself towards mute and be available for any questions.
Sounds good, thanks, Kent.
Steve, if you want to introduce yourself?
So Steve Hagelin with Stantec. I'm a civil engineer that works with kind of the quasi-assistant city engineer that works under Kent on many of these projects, so.
With that, I'll have you jump in. And then just let me know when to advance the slides.
All right, so tonight we're talking about the Northeast Water Study as a proposal to start off on the preliminary design. So some background on this project. At the June City Council meeting, we presented the feasibility study supplemental information. That was some supporting information where we looked at this water supply in Northeast Corcoran. We talked more about water treatment options, some tower analysis, and there was one other, the well, some well alternatives to go with that. In addition to that, we presented a couple alternatives that there was a financial analysis that was done in August to help understand the financial feasibility of those alternatives. Currently, right now, the city has undergone testing on well number 1, and that is the site that's already been purchased. So we have a viable well site and a test well pumping that's already been done. So we've tested it and feel like we have a viable well 1 site. So where we're at in this flow chart, as we worked from the top down, we have the draft feasibility study that was presented in that supplemental information. So really the next step in that process that would go with that water supply planning would be kicking off the project into what we would call a 30% process design. That helps us really get started on this initial process so we can start going on really looking at these things in more detail and really driving towards what this project would be. Allows us to kind of look through some of those alternatives, and with that, we would look at the architectural features, confirm some of the treatment alternatives, and then look at some of the tower and storage, and we'll talk about those a little later here. So with this 30%, this preliminary design we're talking about, there's really 3 components. There's the water treatment facility itself, which is the vast majority of it is that treatment. There's the well and infrastructure, like we've talked about. The well has already been tested. We have a viable well. But with some site planning, it's been permitted through the MDH, but we think the well location will have to just move slightly within the site. And just with the way permitting goes, we would just have to update some documents and go through that permit process with MDH. So some minor adjustments to that. And then storage, would have to look at, really finalize those storage discussions we've had of above ground versus in-ground storage. Within there's multiple, that's really high level. There's a number of subcomponents. So when we talk about within the water treatment facility, there's SCADA, which is kind of this component that overall controls. It's a way for the Public Works to interface with these and control remotely these programs and monitor them, which is really something that'll probably be incorporated with this design. There's a number of architectural site designs that'll be incorporated. We'll finalize the site layout and just a number of smaller things with the county access. And probably most importantly, it's just another cost update. As we go throughout this process, we know the costs aren't static. As things move, it's always updating. And so with that 30% design, we want to reset and really understand what those best cost estimates are at that time. So with the treatment, the water treatment that we're looking at based off the test wells is primarily to treat for iron and manganese. Those are the known drinking water standards that we would be targeting with our treatment component. Some of the keys we talked about, especially during that supplemental piece was making sure the system has flexibility, knowing that MDH and the requirements are ever evolving. Having a water treatment system that's flexible and versatile in the future and can be easily retrofitted and really gives us alternatives in the future to make sure that we can be adaptable and kind of react to any changes in our water system or the regulations that control it. There's a number of architectural options. We know the water treatment facility will be located within a residential neighborhood, so we plan on there being discussions to make sure there's those, how does it fit with the neighborhood? How does architecturally making sure it doesn't, water treatment facilities can range the gamut of very industrial, institutional buildings to really fitting in with that residential neighborhood. So it's that planning piece to make sure that that fits with the neighborhood, with the city's vision for what they want it to be. And then make sure that's incorporated into the design. Once we can get to architectural, then we can help facilitate a building that works within that as well. We know there will be council workshops. These are a number of things that'll have to be talked about, especially the architectural, some of those really planning outward-facing components, the water storage. So there'll be council discussions to bring that forward and help make those decisions along the way, because we don't want to get to this 30% threshold, come back and present, here it is, right? And then, we want to be able to make decisions along the way and help update the council along the way. And then that 30% drawings. And so there's a number of features that go into this. We've got electrical, we've got mechanical, we've got architectural, all alongside the main component of that water treatment. So it's a big component, is just getting all of those trades so we can really understand, as we make these decisions, what those costs all roll up to be. Like I said, with the well and infrastructure, right now we have the test well taken care of. We have the updating of the permits, as I already kind of alluded to. With the adjacent Bellwether development, there's 3 trunk systems that would have to be extended to our water treatment facility. So we have to bring the sewer, the raw water, and the water. And what that raw water line is, as we talked about with that supplemental, we'll be putting future wells out in these development well fields. So we need that line to be able to bring that water back into the plant so we can treat it. So with that corridor, we're going to have to define where that lies and start that property acquisition process, assuming that's the way we go. That's just a long timeline. So we want to get that initial design, that layout, we can feel pretty comfortable with it. It's not the full design, but get that layout in place so we can start that process for that land acquisitions. And then the water tower. At the supplemental, we talked about those two options being overhead storage and underground storage. Costs were presented at that supplemental information, and they were approximately very similar to one another. There was a slight change. Probably the biggest difference was that long-term maintenance of the painting that goes with the overhead towers, but I think on the scale of the annualized cost, it was in the ballpark of a $20,000 difference. So they're very similar to one another, but it's just finalizing what that storage alternative would be. Once that's designed, we need to understand the geotechnical. That would be a big key that's going to drive costs, especially if we go to overhead storage. Just making sure we don't have a lot of substandard soils. We can, as I talked to our water guys, we can build it on anything, but there's a cost to do it. So we want to make sure we understand that as we move forward with that site, or any site. So kind of as we talked about, we need these stop-ins along the way, or these council updates or workshops. What we would see kind of within that schedule is trying to get initially the architectural and site layout discussion started in October, November. In your packet, we had a schedule that we laid out for that project, right, how it lays out. And what we've been talking about is 3 years from the start of project to when we're delivering water. The schedule we presented exceeds that, but we know along the way there's going to be things that we kind of stop and pause and have to discuss about. So as we work through the schedule, it's always moving, but we'll understand if some discussions are gonna have to take longer, and as we pause along the way, just making sure we're constantly looking at that schedule too, of what it means at the end of it. So what we mean with this is we would like to ideally target really beginning here of getting the architectural site layout discussions happening with council, just so we understand ideas of really what they want that field to be. Same thing with getting that tower and storage identified, really preliminarily here in that design. Those are things we want to, if we can work through, get at least the ball started so that we can do the soil borings and some of those things we talked about, so we can get that preliminary information in hand. So once we really get into the design phases, the true design, we can really go. And then the well and infrastructure, like we talked about, that final design, as you looked at the schedule, that can come. It's really getting the easement acquisition process, or your easements and property acquisitions is probably the most important here, so. So what the schedule would look like, we would work through this preliminary design phase through much of 2021. Depending on how these conversations go, we'd be looking at carrying it into the early part of next year. Again, that tower storage pre-design would go hand in hand with that. Ideally, we would be looking at that treatment plant design being this spring, if we could get to, that 30% plans this winter, spring, so that we can get going on that design. Try to hit a competitive bidding window in the spring, summer of next year. That allows, kind of, as you look at that overall schedule, it kind of goes in that annual cyclical. So we really want to, if it's allowable, get those footings in that building kind of shelled up by the fall, so we can then stage some of that winter work. There's a lot of design planning that goes into that, so that's a super high level overlook at what we're looking at here, but it just kind of gives you an idea of preliminarily what we would target is really working through some of these pre-design, design, winter, spring, so we can bid and start seeing stuff happening next summer. So I know I ran through that pretty quickly, I apologize, but I'm sure there's plenty of questions, comments along the way, so I'm here to answer them the best I can. Ken's on the line too. I don't know if he'll be able to, but we can take any questions or comments.
Thank you. Any questions to start off?
If I may.
Go for it.
So the proposal we have in front of us is for preliminary design of 360,000. When I look at this timeline chart, then there's a final design. And the combined cost of the two designs are 570,000. And then you presented about a 60% design on that other timeline. That was on that one sheet. There was a 30 and a 60, where you showed the timeline coming down, where we were at in the process.
On the presentation on the screen?
You're right.
That second slide.
The flow chart?
I'll find it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was basically a 60% step.
So is there another cost
phase?
in there?
No, the 60%, so when we look at our final, that second bar that you look at, that final design that
Yeah.
we're not asking for authorization at this time, this would just be the preliminary design. The final design would incorporate the 60 and that 90 design set is all incorporated in that future phase.
So that'd all be in that 280,000 estimate.
Yeah, yep.
Gotcha.
But that's for water treatment alone, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So in total, we're looking at 570,000 for the, roughly.
In total, once everything's
Treatment.
done, it'd be in excess of that, but that's just our design services. But
Right, yeah, I'm talking about just your design services.
Yes.
Per se.
Yeah.
In Mayor and Council, that's also assuming it goes smoothly along one course. I've emailed, I think, with Councilman Nichols and talked to the mayor if it takes a longer time to really go down storage or ground or elevated, and we want to go 60% on both, that obviously is a much higher cost than within the first month, yep, we got a decision, we're going ground, or we're going elevated, now go. So, it depends how efficient we are with our direction too.
And kind of on that, we were talking about this a bit earlier, but you were saying likely if we had that direction in, say, a month or 2 months, that would be sufficient where we're not starting to get into that 60% and having to do it for both.
Yeah, I think Steve talked about by
Yes.
November.
Yes, you're correct. That's why we wanted to start.
Gotcha.
We would like to have those discussions and really hone in on those features early on. So
Gotcha.
the longer you carry them forward, the more cost if there is rework to go back and recenter it.
Makes sense.
Do we see any savings in the design cost then if we move faster on some of these items, or do you think this is like low end?
This would be assuming it follows a path that we would expect. It doesn't mean that, as we talk about this initially, yes, we're going to talk about these alternatives, but this pricing here would be if things moved along sequentially, we didn't have to then jump back in the process.
This is all based on hourly rates, right? So,
Correct. Yep, everything's hourly rates.
okay.
And functionally, from the staff level, how that work, this is really, be Kevin to direct the work and check-ins. He'd be reviewing the bills, reviewing what the consultant team are working on sequentially, so it makes sense. So there'd be an internal control of Kevin.
Okay. That was my only real question. Thank you.
Jeremy or Dean?
So, thank you very much for the detailed presentation. Sorry that you got put on the spot.
It's okay.
So, I support proceeding with the design. I think it's important long-term for the development of the city that we do this. I think it's important that we're efficient about it. My initial take on, I know you're not necessarily asking for us to choose between different competing options, but my personal take, and based on the feedback that I've had from folks in the neighborhood, there seems to be a lot of reluctance and resistance to the idea of doing a water tower. And I kind of empathize with that in that this is a neighborhood that's surrounded on the northeast by industrial property and on the south by what will be eventually commercial property. And then if you put a lot of city infrastructure into the neighborhood and the park, I feel like we need to prioritize keeping it as natural as we can. So I'd like to have a little discussion about, we've talked in the past about ground storage, and I'm not totally clear if that means underground storage, such that we could have, like, the park space be open, or if that means it's ground level storage, so there's still a big tank, it's just on the surface instead of 150 feet in the air. So what are we able to choose with this site?
Both.
Okay.
So it can be, right? So some communities have underground. So you can have them entirely underground with some usable space within constraints on top. With anything, depending on the specifics of what's chosen, if it's in a tough area or if there's a lot of excavation that needs to happen to facilitate it, and there's costs with that. And everything really depends on the details of exactly what we're talking about. But there's some cities have on-grade, just it looks like a silo or a big water tank that's just sitting on the ground. That's the most cost-effective and is an option. And so you can do it either way.
So from my perspective, I don't know where the rest of the council feels about this. I'd like to see it underground if we can. If that is not practical or cost-effective, I'd like to see what we could do to try to make it fit into the neighborhood and become an amenity. So architecturally styled in such a way that it adds to the character of the neighborhood rather than takes away from it. Anybody else have differing thoughts or thoughts
I
in
would
agreement with that?
agree. I mean, I think we'd have to see what some of the numbers roughly play out to in terms of the underground tank. I feel like I know the least about how that actually, ballpark what we're talking there. But if it's, economically feasible, I'd be in favor of that. And if not, I'd agree that trying to address some of the concerns with the style and, how we screen around it and other things like that, I think would be important if we end up going the tower route.
Yeah, I think a ground tank could work too if it could be, bermed and landscaped and so on, so that it's more or less hidden if underground isn't
The
practical.
main concern that I had talked to Brad about previously was the footprint would be significantly bigger for a ground tank than a tower. Is that true?
Yeah, you don't quite have, yes, you'd have more of an impact on the ground.
Gotcha.
itself, so.
But something we could see exactly what that is, or roughly what that is, and
Let me ask this. So the site that we saw on the map is part of the city park area, but there's that open space park that's to the south. And I don't know what the lay of the land there is specifically, but would it be practical if you need a bigger footprint than you have in that 7-acre park to put the storage in the open space park?
The open space park's wetland in certain areas, isn't it? And then it's and it's high-value woods
Yeah, we
and
probably
others,
have
so.
some regulatory challenges to go through
Okay.
for that access, a lot of those things. So it might be pretty difficult and cost prohibitive on the surface.
Very good. That's why I asked the question. Thank you.
I would imagine a below-grade facility, storage facility, would have quite a few constraints to what you could actually do with the space above it, right?
Yeah, some sort of an open, obviously some sort of an open space. There's a time where you have to make sure you can access it, maintain it in case something were to happen, so.
But you can't make it like a play field or something where the general public can gather on it either, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, you want to be thoughtful. I don't know exactly what all the limitations are, but yeah, you definitely want to be thoughtful. It's not just open.
Maybe those are some of the questions we work on figuring out over the next month plus.
Yeah.
And make a little bit more educated decision on which of these routes to go for the storage side, at least, at that point.
If it's okay for the council, I had Steve and Kent really rush a diagram to walk through the shadowing, and I emailed it out just a few hours before the meeting, so I apologize, but I think this is really a good image to walk through. So Steve put this together in essentially seasons, so this would be a shadowing in January. So you have a 9 a.m. where the shadow would be, an 11 a.m., 1 o'clock p.m., and 3 o'clock p.m. The differential line here really is this is everything east of this line is the approved bellwether project. West of this line is the enhanced bellwether project, essentially, that has not received final approvals yet, has preliminary approvals. The next slide shows April, as far as where times will be from 9 a.m., 11 a.m., 1 p.m., 3 p.m., and then I added 5 p.m. in April. Obviously, the sun stays out a little longer as you get a little later in the year, too. The next slide shows July, with obviously the sun gets higher in the sky here, and the shadows shrink. And then October. So I think it's a very telling image that you'd see what at least short-term impacts would be as the shadow swings throughout the day. And I don't know, Steve, if you have any anecdotal items to add to those images.
Just the placement within the park, it being on the south side, other than January, anecdotally, as you kind of saw that swing through the middle of the day, it really didn't hit. It kind of shadowed predominantly the park during that, so I thought that was kind of interesting just as we looked at it, so. Obviously, you get the very early morning and the evening shadows that cast well beyond it, but.
Are we aware of, so it primarily, most of the shadows that I'm seeing are impacting the development that hasn't seen the final approval yet. But of the initial Bellwether project, do we know if any of those areas in the shadow have actually homes being built on them?
They're final platted, so if they haven't been built, they'd be built in the relative near future.
Right, so the only impacting people would be the people that have actually purchased a lot to this point.
I think with pace, they'd likely be fully constructed before our tower would go up.
Yep.
Right. But I think what Jeremy is trying to get at is the tower impacts people that are living in that area, right? And what I'm suggesting is it really only impacts people that have purchased a lot up until the point we actually commit to going to a tower.
Right.
Because anybody after that point would know that a tower is being built in that area and can make a decision whether they're gonna purchase a lot.
Right, regarding the shadow at least.
Regarding the shadow, and
Yeah.
right, so, to me, the only impact people are those that have already purchased in that area.
Yeah, and
Not
those folks
knowing
are
the
still
tower's being
concerned.
built.
Right, not the ones that would purchase after knowing that it was there or after it was already there.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I would think at this point is probably a really low number of people to be impacted. But
Sure.
I guess we wouldn't know that without asking Pulte.
Yeah.
And maybe that's,
Mr. Mayor,
yeah, go ahead.
the footprint of a underground, I'm gonna, a little pun on words, but an underground tower, that footprint is roughly how big? How many acres? And I'm going off my past experience over Maple Grove, we've got that underground water tower
up on top of a hill, and that footprint isn't all that big.
Yeah,
It's
I'll
just
give an
a matter of-
approximation here. Sorry, I don't have
Yeah.
it. But, so the tower we're showing here is a 66-foot diameter tower, and it's approximately 50 feet tall. Now, you're not going to build a 50-foot tall on ground, so I'd say approximately 4 times that's a fair, you're only talking about a 10-foot type chamber
So-
would be a typical, or what I would expect in that ballpark. So you're talking approximately 120 feet by 120 feet would be that below-ground impact ball, or 100 foot by 100 foot.
And then how much
Quarter of an acre.
sticking out of ground?
Really, it depends of, you could have as little as none or the entire thing.
We don't know the true soil borings here at this
Correct.
point right now, so it's all dependent on, okay. Otherwise,
Mr. Mayor, this is Kevin. I can just add a little context.
That'd be great.
So really what we've done over the last couple of years here in the feasibility studies of the system, we've been authorizing on an annual basis and segmental basis, money towards studying the feasibility, which really identifies the big components. How big is the storage need to be? Where is the land going to be? That kind of thing. And it's really, we don't have all these details worked out, right? We have general ideas. We have multiple sites. I mean, we have several sites that we're targeting. The reason we're focusing on Bellwether is really simply kind of the opportunity and the overall cost effectiveness with the development coming in. So that's why we're kind of been focusing on this site. So there's options out there that we haven't fully detailed or evaluated with geotechnical, for example, groundwater, for example. So, and I don't want to discourage conversation tonight, but really all these questions you have are what we would bring back in what we call preliminary design. We want to get out of the high level and start being able to answer these questions. So part of this package is to bring, here's some things we'll bring to the workshop. What are some options of underground? What's the size? What's the implications? We'll get soil data here. If you choose to consider another site, maybe we pursue 2 sites that may add some costs. But, our goal as a design team would be to help identify, with your help, all the questions you have and deliver some options and help you make relatively quick but really smart decisions. So, again, that's what we're going into. We're basically stop spending our money on feasibility high level and start answering some of these detailed questions. So that's, when we say pre-design, that's the intent of this next step, is to answer everything you guys have brought up today, and they're all great questions. So keep them coming. But I just wanted to add that context to, that's what we want to get into. We want to be able to answer these questions to help you guys feel comfortable with the decision.
Makes sense. Appreciate that. So I think these are all good discussion points, like you said, for the next steps in terms of this preliminary, lost my page actually, proposal in front of us. Are we feeling comfortable with it? Or are we got other concerns we want to bring up here?
Couple of numbers, and let me know if I'm asking too much. We're looking at a storage facility of around 750,000 gallons?
Correct.
Okay, and then if it was a tower, about how tall?
180 feet.
Okay. And I go back to, I kind of listen to the council and stuff. We want silos and those kind of things to identify Corcoran and stuff. I live across from a 100 and some foot tall silo that changes my look on the sunset every so often. When it gets by, it's by. When it's not, I also have I think it's a 750,000 gallon slurry right next to that silo, and that's about 40 feet tall and stuff. So if anybody wants to see dimensions or size, come on out.
Sounds
we
good.
We can see some sunsets, but those are pretty basically the same sizes that we're talking about here, if you need a visual on that.
Yeah, I might actually take you up on
And,
that. If you could take some pictures, that'd probably be helpful to everyone.
I can absolutely send those to you guys. So
Awesome.
That's my thing, again, my past and my experience and such. I think in the previous community, we did a really good job putting in a water treatment in and amongst residential and such, and then burying a water tower. I always give Public Works a hard time about burying a water tower, but it has served its purpose very, very well and actually reduced significant amount of costs on tower upkeep and stuff, so, great work, you guys.
The tower you're speaking of is the one on 10, right?
Yep, across from the cemetery and such.
Right, so
It's already elevated on top of
yeah,
it, so you
that's
don't,
that's kind of what I'm thinking is, it may be different in that you built it on top of a hill
yeah, and
and with a
the-
street on one side.
The pump isn't, well, it was street on the south, but then
Right.
it's surrounded by
Homes on it,
a pretty significant development on the east and north of it, and then the west of it it falls down into the creek bed and
Right.
such, so. And then again, since it's elevated, there's not as big a pump to supply the community with water, but there's a bigger pump to pump the water to that tank and
But-
such, so.
Just the space above that tank is not used, is it?
Not a bit, no, no. It's all landscaped, and I've had numerous people in the past ask me, why didn't we put a ball field there? Well, you can't put a ball field on top of water supply, so.
Yeah, I would think there'd be a security issue.
Yep,
Yeah.
big time, yep.
So,
Thank you for letting me ask those questions very much.
Anything else?
no, I think the general question in front of us, right, is to move forward with the design as presented or to look for other proposals for designs.
Yep, that's one of them. Regarding, if it's Wank or
Yeah.
looking at someone else. I'm personally comfortable, with Wank, and I think, there'd be significant amount of work that would have to go into bringing another firm on board at this point. So, I mean, unless we had a specific issue or there was a significant cost saving that we could find, I don't know that I would be in favor of, changing that up, but.
Mr. Mayor, are you aware of anybody else who uses Wank for this kind of work?
Yeah, most of.
Could you elaborate?
these, I think around us, I'm trying to think of,
We had a laundry list in our presentation.
yeah,
In a number of places.
quite a few. Most of the surrounding cities
I
use
think it
Wank
was in the
for,
supplemental information and.
gotcha.
Yeah,
Yeah, at least for some things. Not everyone has their own city water, but
So, yeah, just for the team, the city of Delano's water treatment plant, city of Maple Plain, where our office is. We've done wells for the city of Dayton, involved with the city of Maple Grove's water system. So our city of Chaska, we've done a fair amount of projects here within the Twin Cities and throughout the state of Minnesota. So the team's got quite a bit of experience in this.
I asked that leading question intentionally. I'm always skeptical of, single source supplies, and I've expressed that to staff many times. But in this case, I feel like it's appropriate, given the extensive background. I did double check with the Public Works Director in Maple Grove, and he spoke highly of you guys too. So I have no reason to doubt that we're going to get good quality work. So I'm fine with proceeding with the one engineering vendor at this time.
And we have a long-term relationship with Wank, and I think Wank has done some services for us in the past where they haven't asked for compensation too, so I think I don't see a need to go outside.
I agree.
The numbers too originally were around $14.5 million and such. Was the estimate, if I remember off the top of my
Different
head.
variables, but yeah.
These numbers were at 11, I think I totaled it up roughly about 11.7, and then the unknown is land acquisition and
They
stuff
don't
right
include
now.
the
right?
unknowns of,
Yeah.
like I said, there's inflation, there's just contingency, there's some unknowns that are within
Yep.
there that
No,
we talked about. As we move along this, no price is static. This is constantly updating just based off the market and based off of the final design of what this system will be. So,
Will the preliminary 30% design include any of the security aspects around the online access to the control systems and so on, or is that a later stage where we would consider that?
we'll want to start those discussions. It won't be finalized by that time, but it's something that we'll make sure is included, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that seems like it's ever increasing.
It's constantly changing.
Yeah.
The quicker we can make this happen, hopefully the less it'll cost.
For sure.
I was
Especially in
just
today's
reading
world.
that, I think CrowdStrike put out a statement that attacks are going up by like 60% a year currently. So there's a lot of pressure on these kinds of systems. So making sure that that's a consideration will be important.
For sure.
I agree. I have a monthly meeting with our IT provider just to kind of look ahead, and the security side is something that they represent some of the same information you're talking about, and some decisions that we'll have to make here if we want to upgrade our systems. We're already in good shape because we have a police department, so we have high standards already, but when you add a water supply, you certainly want to escalate even further.
Definitely. It sounds like we're all comfortable with continuing with Wink. Is there any other concerns we want to get out?
There are no concerns about the competition or anything like that as far as going towards one. We don't need to get multiple bids or anything like that.
This is a professional service contract, so it's a little different that way.
Thank
So
you.
since we have a approved fee schedule with the professional service contract with the hourly rates for all the different people, it's a great question. It's not
Minnesota statute doesn't tell us we've got to go out and
Yeah,
get
for
17
professional
different bids or
services, you
anything
can
like that.
continue with a provider.
A little bit of sarcasm there. Thanks.
Great question.
But to elucidate that for the public a little bit, when we actually go to the construction phase, that would be competitively bid. And
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. Another great point.
All right.
Great work.
So we would be looking for a motion then, okay, so you're on top of it.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the preliminary design for the Northeast Corcoran Water Supply Project in the amount of $360,000 as outlined in the proposal from Wink.
So moved.
second.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All set. Thank you. We are on to, I'll let Brad finish his note there. Good. 10B, Commissioner Appointment Process.
Mayor and Council, just a brief discussion here. As you all know, we have a vacancy on the Planning Commission, as Mr. Varenkamp was just recently, this meeting, appointed to the City Council. We do have an advertisement out right now for the vacancy due on 4 p.m. October 20th, and hopes to bring forward potentially at the October 28th meeting, really trying to get somebody on board before the November Planning Commission meeting. So before we complete the process, really we're looking for information from council on what the process is you want to create. So, just a couple options. One would be to, right at a regular meeting, bring all the applicants in front of yourselves to discuss. You certainly could establish a subcommittee with 2 of the council members and other members as needed, who would then interview and make a recommendation to the council. You could hold a special meeting to interview applicants, which was always hard to find another meeting for everyone to get together outside of. Or different versions of this. So really, as staff, we're just looking for a direction on how we bring applicants to you to a point for the vacancy.
All right. I'll start off with my thoughts on which one of these options makes the most sense to me. I would think the subcommittee route, just in terms of not having to parade everyone out in front of a meeting and go through the whole thing publicly. I mean, it's not that it's not public, but you know what I mean. Not making them go through the whole process in front of everyone. So I'd be in favor of the subcommittee. And then in terms of how those would be created, I think it would make sense to have the mayor, the council liaison to that commission. So they have some sort of background with that commission. And then Brad suggested, actually, when I was talking to him the other day, also having the chair of that commission be part of those conversations as well, which I think makes a lot of sense. Then the only kind of oddities that could come up is if the mayor, like I am currently, is the liaison to one of the commissions. We'd find a different way, I guess, to pick that second person, whether it's on a case-by-case basis or volunteer or rotate or whatever. But hopefully it shouldn't be too much of an issue where we're just rapid fire going through Parks and Trails commissioners. Hopefully not. But yeah, that's kind of where I am on that.
I would agree. I think that's a reasonable way to do it. It also minimizes the burden on the applicants to have to meet with a lot of people and defend their application or explain their rationales. So I feel like it's the most efficient approach.
I'd like to be on the subcommittee.
Okay. So, like for all of them?
For the planning commission one.
Okay.
Sure. I mean, we don't have to make a decision on all the
No.
committees tonight, so.
I don't think so. Or,
No, I mean, it'd be nice so we'd be rediscussing this anytime we have a vacancy, which is just fine. We pretty much have every time we've had a vacancy
Yeah.
to discuss this process. But, as far as having a subcommittee, we could only have 2 council members present, or we'd have to post a quorum and make it a public meeting available to everybody. That's the only challenge.
this wouldn't prohibit any council member from doing their own interview and call or set up like that.
Correct.
It would just be for one of the candidates that gets nominated, so to speak. But wouldn't prevent someone else from still having that, going through that process separately and nominating their own person if they so chose. So,
Correct, and ultimately, it's a vote at the city council.
Right.
So as much as a subcommittee could say, or if Councilor Schultz says, here's our recommended candidate, she'll have to obtain the votes to appoint the person.
Right.
Yeah, as a liaison, I'm fine being on the subcommittee.
Okay. Any thoughts, Dean?
I'm brand new. I went through the process. I enjoyed having conversations with everybody that called me and stuff. And I experienced no ill will or anything, so what you guys are talking about is great. My due diligence is go through the applicants, make my own phone calls and talk to
Right.
them, whether or not whether I'm on the subcommittee or not. I'll do my part.
Gotcha. Sounds good.
I mean, the only part of the subcommittee, I guess, is to bring a recommendation forward, correct?
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I guess I'd still be interested in being part of the planning commission one, since I was on planning commission for 4.5 years or whatever it was, and.
Gotcha. Okay, well, how about if I know Brad would like us probably to figure out all the details like you mentioned, but I think we're all okay with the subcommittee concept itself, and for who that second person is or how exactly that gets determined, maybe we do some thinking on that. And although I guess we're trying to do it in time for this specific opening.
How did you do the last one where we had a subcommittee? Did you meet all at one time?
For the planning one?
No, the charter commission was the last time we had a subcommittee, right?
No, it was planning commission.
Planning.
Oh, it was.
When Commissioner Lanterman was appointed.
We didn't have a subcommittee at that point, though.
No, we did. It was Tom and I. So we had, I want to say, 3 applicants. And we spoke to each of them.
2 or 3.
You didn't put forth a recommendation, though.
No, we recommended Commissioner Lanterman coming out of that process.
I don't recall the discussion in the meeting about that.
I actually don't recall, so I trust your judgment on that, so.
I have my notes. I can show them for you if you'd like. But that was the process. I know there were at least 2. I think there might have been a third as well. And we did a joint interview. I think it was about 30 to 45 minutes with each candidate, talked through their background, why they had applied, and then met to discuss the merits of the various candidates and come forward with a recommendation.
Okay. Because you could just post a quorum for a meeting, too.
Mm-hmm. Which would basically be option 3.
Yeah, but we wouldn't need the full council there.
Right. I guess I'd be in favor of 2, and if the situation called for it, I mean, it's not like we couldn't do a special meeting if we thought there was going to be disagreement on the candidate or wanting further full council involvement on a specific interview process. We could always do that on a case-by-case basis and have the subcommittee be the kind of standard protocol unless we feel we want some more in-depth full council digging into something.
I don't think you need to tie a subcommittee to who the liaison is, though, either. I mean, that wasn't the original point of the liaison. The point of the liaison was just to have somebody at the meetings to speak give an update on what's going on in the council. So I think you could just have two random people at any given time too. So if it works for Jeremy one time and it works for me another time, or it works for Dean, or it works for John, whoever can do it when we have an opening. I don't think we need to just be.
Well, that's kind of what the liaison thing would do. It would be a different team each time.
Yeah, but you're sticking to the same it's still the liaison mayor is what it is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're putting more emphasis on liaison being part of it
Okay.
versus just having whoever do it, So, I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill either, but I would like to be involved with it.
Yeah.
So.
I'd love to have you involved.
So Mayor and Council, one way of doing it, I guess, this way is each vacancy comes up, and here's a vacancy. Who would like to be part of this subcommittee? And if it's 3, it's a public meeting that's quorum notice. If it's 2, it's a subcommittee that'd be one, just a reactionary way to do it. If there's 3, then we have to post a quorum.
Yeah.
It just really depends. It wouldn't be a formal meeting then, or would it be a formal meeting?
It would need to be a formal meeting if there was, well, I have to think, it could be a work session. We could hold it as a work session to interview the candidates, and then we'd
However, we would typically, we televise all of our work sessions. So
Yeah,
then that's
that's
a
right.
recorded document. Unless the council directs us to discontinue that practice for these work sessions. But typically, we've been video recording every work session as well.
That aligns with our core value of transparency, so I don't think we would want to discontinue that practice.
Well,
And then it functionally becomes like a council meeting, really. for
Right.
discussion, so.
yeah, which is not, I don't know, not my preference, I guess, with just how that works with bringing in a bunch of candidates and making them do it. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but I tend to just like the subcommittee way now, it's, regardless of who's on it. I think we can figure that out as we go, but
Might be putting the cart before the horse. Have we gotten any candidates yet?
No.
Okay,
Not-
so is there a point where we can, you already put in the said applications in, are due by 4 PM Wednesday, October 2nd, or 20th, excuse me. At that point, depending on how many, can we make the call on
Does the meeting fall the following Thursday?
a subcommittee or whatever?
Council meeting?
Council meeting, if the council feels necessary to appoint that quickly. The planning commission still has 4 members, and as long as there's a quorum, there's really not a problem. It's a recommending body.
Well, I think to the point, what Dean was saying is that, we have nobody. So it might come down to the point on the 20th, we only have 1 application.
Potentially. I know Jessica's probably talked to a few who are interested.
Yeah, I think that with the discussion at the when we were talking about people who are interested in serving on council, there was some discussion with having them, whether or not they'd be interested. And so I think some of you had discussions with them on whether or not they'd be interested in serving. So we certainly could reach out to those folks.
yeah.
If that'd be something
Great.
council would want us to look at. Or look at other commission applications that we've received in the past.
Mhm.
Okay. Then I guess I'd recommend I think we're generally on board with the subcommittee idea. It's a matter of who's specifically on it, and maybe we address that as we get a little closer and see who we have for candidates and can figure out the process as we go.
We've got, 2 council meetings between now and October
Yeah.
20th, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
we got time.
I'd suggest we wait on that. I'd like to hear what John's thoughts are.
Yep.
Works for me.
Did we get where you wanted to go?
Everything you need?
We got there.
All right. Go on to 11A, which is a paving petition for Park Trail Road.
public comment?
Yeah, Mayor
Oh.
and Council, I can walk through that. So we do have a public comment opportunity as well for new business. This is the paving petition, stormwater area charge, job description update, and potential town hall meeting. If I don't have anyone that's in advance wanted to speak internally. For those who do, it is a 5-minute limit that we do have. And Jessica, if you want to talk about online.
Anyone joining us online can press star 9 if you're joining us via phone. Otherwise, you can press the reactions button and raise your hand, and I can recognize you. I would note we have 2 people online who aren't staff members, and currently none of them are raising their hand.
Gotcha. All
See
righty.
your hand.
All right, Mayor and Council. First item, as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, is a paving petition for Park Trail Road. The residents of Park Trail Road submitted a petition in which all 7 occupied lots signed to request the city initiate a project to pave Park Trail Road. I did note in the packet there are 6 additional vacant buildable lots that are not included in this petition who are all owned by one landowner, and they did not reach out to that individual. It's the same individual we're working with to purchase easements for the 66th Street improvements as well. So if supported by the council, we'd recommend moving forward with the feasibility study for that project. Kevin did a really high-level cost estimate based upon Corcoran Trail, for example, and came up with a rough estimate of $190,000 for the project. And as far as potential revenue sources, assuming we would have the same assessment level as Corcoran Trail at nearly $11,000 a lot, that would generate about $140,000, leaving roughly a $50,000 gap. Each year for the 2022 budget, for example, we have $175,000 in the asphalt budget, which we use towards projects. We could use $50,000 of that to fund the gap. There is also the issue of assessment. So if we do assess, we offer typically a 10-year payback. And then additionally, with the vacant lots, the council may want to consider deferring those until time of purchase, for example. So there's a carrying cost of that as well that would have to be carried by the asphalt fund in the meantime. And in the packet, I kind of go over where we're at with that fund. So really looking for council support of potentially moving forward to the feasibility study on this project. And talking with Kevin, there could be some efficiencies here. The base course for the Gleason Parkway Extension project, which will come out to 116 along this corridor, will be done this year. That contractor will have to come back next year for the wear course. So we could, potentially encourage that contractor to bid, and maybe they'd have some efficiency since they'd already be out here for that type of project. So there's, again, they have to be low bid on some sort of project. But I'll stop there, and I can answer any questions, as can Kevin.
Any questions?
My only question was regarding deferred assessment. You said it based on time of sale.
Yeah, just one option. The longest we can is 20, 30 years. So at some point, there has to be a trigger to it. Otherwise, the council could say, no, it's a buildable lot, and you have the same 10-year payback as those people living on those lots.
Does transfer of title count as bill of sale?
Generally, the title company will reach out to myself or Michelle to verify whether or not there are any deferred assessments, and that's generally when they catch that, so it'd be a title issue.
Would we
You
know
could-
if they change title?
We don't always know, but that would be generally when we'd find out when they reach out to us. Otherwise, that assessment would continue with the property whether or not it's paid. Generally, that's when it triggers the payment for it, but if not, it stays with the property whether or not it's sold. So for example, in downtown, when we did the street improvement project and the downtown sewer and water project, we did have some properties and they were able to sell, but keep those assessments on the property. So
Yeah.
I mean, this maybe I'm going off base here, but those six buildable lots under the ownership of one individual, if they transfer through a an estate, not through a sale. And then this new estate, whoever obtains the estate builds homes on it. When does the assessment go into effect if they didn't effectively purchase the land? You know where I'm going with this?
Yep, I do. I think they would have to transfer ownership or sell essentially to have a lot built on it.
I think so. We could
Typically.
certainly look
It's
at.
a- Be a good attorney question.
With the attorney, yeah.
But I think that's probably likely the route that would happen. With these specific property owners just knowing the parties involved.
Right, that's where I'm wondering if there's an additional trigger we have to put in place. Or if, I guess you'd have to ask the attorney on that one.
Could you do it on, like, issuance of a building permit or something?
I'm kind of forgetting, I think there are options beyond sale. And that's
Yes,
how
and
we
I
would
think we
write
can-
the assessment.
It'd be how we write the resolution. So we'd have to
Yes.
work with the attorney as well as make sure that we're within our policy. But I think that there's a way, there are certainly ways to do it. It's just deferred assessments rely heavily on staff making sure and keep tracking those. So that is just something always to.
Yeah.
And these seasons are all kind of together, and it's not hopefully too difficult to track
Correct.
comparatively.
And just being said, the longest you can defer is 30 years. The council could certainly choose a much shorter term than that as
Mhm.
well.
And generally deferment under our policy is for green acres or egg preserve.
Okay.
What did we do on, I feel like there was another one we had recently with a deferred assessment. I thought it was 20 years.
We had talked about, I think, deferring the city center drive and those.
That's a Green Acre situation out
Okay.
there.
Gotcha.
And that was a time of sale too, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. That's what we discussed.
I'm a sailor, yeah.
Ah.
It really comes, there's gonna be a carrying cost that the asphalt fund would likely have to have for some time. It
Mhm.
really depends if that's an acceptable use. This would pretty much drain our asphalt fund with the projects we've been committed to, which is significant. Until those payments start coming back annually, we'll be filling that back up.
I feel like a 10-year limit is probably suitable, given the wear life of the road. I wouldn't want to see it go out to 30 and it's already time to redo the road at that point, and you'd be assessing again.
That's a good point.
The paving on this road is just,
There is none.
no, I'm talking, we're just laying asphalt down. We aren't doing curb and gutter or anything else, because down the road, this is gonna be torn up 20 years, however long, if everyone in this area decides to sell and we develop this stuff. It's an overlay over the gravel with minimal maintenance to put in rocks, culverts, those kind of things. I mean, I'm looking
Yeah.
probably way further down the road than what I want, but it's just paving the road is all it is.
It's a little more than that. Kevin, do you want to kind of walk through what the shape and pave, what we call, process would be as compared to a full section curb and gutter? So the short answer is
Yeah.
no, it would remain a rural section, but Kevin, you want to
Right.
walk through that?
Sure, yeah, and the best example, if you're curious, would be to drive through the Appaloosa Woods neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's the accesses north of Rush Creek through, off of 101 through Maple Grove. We just completed that project this year here, a month or so ago. And that was basically a very similar situation where we call it a shape and pave. We don't widen the road. We basically match what's there. We did a little bit of adjustment to make it a cul-de-sac appropriate. So there would be 2 cul-de-sacs here. So we might widen a touch just to make a better radius for the cul-de-sac, for public safety, for school buses, for plows, etc. But basically, essentially, we just do the bare minimum, but making sure it'll last, 15 to 20 years is kind of the design. So that's when we'd expect potentially sewer and water with failing septics to happen. So it's really a shape and pave, but we may add drain tile, we may look at culvert replacements, we may, hog out subgrade and replace it. So we do, a little bit of evaluation on it, but no curb and gutter, and basically the minimum pavement section, which is 3.5 inches. So we call it our low cost and what it looks like, go to Appaloosa Woods. We are also doing it, Corcoran Trail East-West is having a project that was a little bit different, that had more drainage issues, a little bit more complex stormwater expenses, and then it had existing pavement, half pavement, half gravel, so there's a reclamation process with that where we grind up the old pavement. But they're both fairly similar, what we'd be looking at here.
Okay.
And that's where the cost estimate came from, was a balance between those two projects.
Sure. So I think we're generally in agreement on it would be a delayed or a deferred assessment for essentially 10-year term. And other than that, are we generally in favor of this being our third and likely last for a bit road project?
It's only deferred on the vacant.
Correct. Yep. That's a good thing to point on the
That's what I
6
heard.
vacant lot. Yep.
That's the notes I'm taking here.
I would suggest we don't go out as far as 10 years.
Okay.
I would
And the
say.
feasibility study will kind of outline that.
Yeah.
So those final decisions don't have to be made, but
Okay.
Okay.
we can draft a version of that with the 5 or 10, and then we can tweak that.
Perfect.
I'd be fine with 5 too.
Engineering has nothing else to do these days anyway, so.
I want to applaud the residents for taking
Yeah.
the interest and the opportunity to, potentially realize some cost savings by partnering along with the Gleason development as that gets paved. I know a lot of folks out there like their gravel, a lot of folks don't, and it's hard for us to know who's who. So thanks for everybody who's raising your hand and saying we want this, because it makes it easier for us to apply the limited resources that we have in a place where it'll be most appreciated.
Absolutely. Well said. Okay. Is that all you need from us?
Well, so we have
Like-
a motion
you
to
like a
direct
motion?
staff to initiate the feasibility study.
So moved.
I'll second it. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. 11B, stormwater area charge.
Steve, is this you or is this Kevin? I think it's Kevin. Kevin, all right, turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. A real brief presentation here, and then open it up for discussion. Stormwater area charge is the topic. And presently, the city funds all of our stormwater system-related expenses via the general fund. We do not have an enterprise fund specific to stormwater, like we do sewer and water, which are supported by the users themselves. Commonly, revenue options for stormwater management systems do include stormwater area charges, which we are focusing on tonight, and or utility fees. So again, we're focusing on the area charges component of that. And then we have a lot of increasing responsibilities. MS4 permit is entering another phase. We have growing expectations. Water resource type projects also fall under stormwater. So with all these things coming at us, staff is recommending evaluating some sort of mechanism to implement a stormwater area charge as properties develop. We don't know what that looks like. That's what we're asking to evaluate what makes sense for Corcoran. It would take a lot of conversations between planning and the attorney, and even staff brainstorming what works and what doesn't for Corcoran, and we bring that back to you before anything was implemented, obviously. There is a proposal from Link that outlines several of the areas that we brainstormed. It's not comprehensive by any means. We think the focus will be in the developing area, the MUSA, but we are going to evaluate how this might work and benefit rural areas in addition to the MUSA. So that's part of the evaluation. We don't know all the answers today. And ultimately, we would look for a motion to approve this study in the amount of $14,200. That would likely result in an approved budget overage that we believe will, we can still support that with the overall 2021 budget. And with that, I'll open it up to questions for myself or Steve.
Good, thanks. Any questions? Not all at once.
So we're looking at development of fee, and the fee process in development, but then those fees would be allowed to be used in other areas of the city, correct?
Kevin, what
Yeah, we would be looking at doing something similar to what we do with sewer and water. So basically, when a property develops, there would be a area charge that we would collect and put into an enterprise fund, and then we would have a policy of sorts that would allow us to then use those funds for water resource or stormwater management systems. And that could be permit response, that could be street sweeping, or could be we'd have to review what makes sense for us and what the attorney would, be comfortable with. Every community has a different plan. Just like when we develop sewer and water fees, we tie it to some policy and we update them every 5 years or as needed. So it would be a very similar process where we develop our own plan and what that looked like. So, it could vary a lot, and that's why the number is, a little bit higher, but we really want to vet out what makes sense for Corcoran, what options there are, so we can make a clear decision, because it's a quite complex, it's a complex topic, and it's a sensitive topic. We recognize that, but we think that this would make sense. We believe, at least evaluating it, would make sense from a decision-making standpoint.
And add on to that for Kevin, it's a complicated answer. It's easy. It's a good, easy question, but it's a complicated answer. The way I look at it, we're going to have to have a nexus of here's what we believe is the need. If it's like trunk water and sewer divided by the developable acre, and then develop a per acre fee. So it would go more towards development areas taking place. However, we're talking about bigger systems than just the development themselves. So they might be outside the developments, which enhances stormwater for areas also outside those developments. But it's probably related to the near those areas. Is that fair, Kevin?
Yeah, and I think those answers become clear through this process we're trying to ask to undertake, is what that would ultimately look like. And we may get to it and you guys might not like the advantages of this. We don't like what we're getting for this, so we're not going to move forward. I mean, that might be the outcome of this exercise, but we just feel it's important that you understand that this is an option and these are potential things that could be a beneficial result to the community, and is that something that you support in implementing? And we'd work with all of our teams to make sure it worked and was right, just like we do with the sewer and water systems. But it is a little bit of an unknown. There are going to be options, and it's probably going to result in a couple back and forths more than likely before we really ever implement it. But I know we just didn't want you guys not to be aware that this was an option on the table for trying to accomplish some things that we can identify as we bring this back to you. Again, current things we're doing now, funding through the general budget, potentially water resource type projects, potentially staff projects that would be supported to help do stuff, or parts of staff positions. It's just another area where we don't spend a lot of time focusing on stormwater, but those mandates are creeping in, those expectations are creeping in. So it's, if nothing else, it helps us set an expectation of when we might want to do something in the future and just gain more understanding of what makes sense for Corcoran.
Yeah, I was wondering, I guess, if collections of funds through a development fee can be used with regards to maintenance of existing stormwater systems. Like we have holding ponds and drainage, drainage, I don't know, you can't really call them cricks, but you know what I'm talking about.
Ditches.
Yeah. If funds from that can be used in those regards.
Yeah, and this would help vet that out.
Okay.
Other cities have fees with their water bills, for example. It's just a $5 a month or whatever fee across the city. Now, most of the city, Corcoran, right now doesn't get utility bills, so there's different ways to do that. I know the mayor talked to the Greenfield mayor about their stormwater fee that they have and the challenges with the way they've implemented it. So there are many different ways to do it.
This was something that I think we discussed at the goal-setting session back in January. So thanks, Kevin, for staying on top of it and bringing it back to us. I've certainly seen a few examples where there have been potential for off-site impacts to development. One, I think, was Rush Creek Reserve, where there were a couple neighboring property owners who were concerned about outflow from holding ponds and how that would work with their existing ditch network. I think the Garages 2 project that came before the Planning Commission a few weeks ago had some similar concerns, where there's existing drainage problems that they were afraid might be exacerbated. So I think as we continue to see development happen and more acreage changes, we'll probably have both on-site and off-site projects. I know we're kind of forcing development to deal with its own on-site issues, but it will be good to have a mechanism to deal with the off-site that doesn't accrue to the general taxpayer in the far corners of the city. So I certainly support doing the study. I think it'll be good to have a resource to do these kinds of projects, especially as we start to see precipitation patterns change over time and what that will do to our existing drain tile and so on. So I support it.
And I think the important thing that Kevin mentioned was with potential future regulations and changes in what they're requiring, what's being required from cities in stormwater-related areas, that I think it'll be important to have this kind of figured out ahead of time so we can manage that as they come up, so.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
On a personal side, if any of you have ever been in my neighborhood, which I think you all have, there used to be a lake at the intersection of Bechtold and Bass Lake Road. Over the last 14 years since I've lived here, I've spent almost $6,000 repairing drain tile and such, and this is the first year that the farmer has actually gotten a crop off of that 11-acre parcel. So I know that's Rush Creek watershed and those kind of things, but as we do things in these neighborhoods and in these developments, it does truly affect the drain tile and all of those things going on. And I'm speaking personally. I had a conversation with someone from the Rush Creek watershed about 2.5 years ago and was told that there was a significant amount of money set aside to make these changes and improvements to drain that and open that up. And I've made many calls and such.
Yet to see it.
They told me it went, they turned it all over to the city and such. And when I've asked, it just is fallen into whatever. But I still felt responsible that I needed to obviously fix the tile, drain that, and then as a subtopic, I needed to drain it so it went underground through all the way across my property at about a 50-60 foot wide swath, and then end up going into a ditch in the start of the Rush Creek watershed. So the $14,000 and some odd dollars to do this, and again, encompass the whole city and the impact of what it's going to do to farmland and those kind of things too is a big deal on my side. So
Sure, all set. All right. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the stormwater area charge study proposal as outlined from Wank in the amount of $14,200.
so move.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. On to 11C, job description update, Public Safety Administration Manager.
Over to Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. So as you saw in the packet, we kind of explained that, I guess if there's one of the jobs in the city that's changed pretty dramatically over the last several years would be our current Administrative Assistant Paula Steelman's job. And it's really just, it's come with an evolution just in law enforcement in general as our city has grown and just how society has changed. So when Paula started 13 years ago, the officers would type up their reports in a word processor. They'd turn them in. She would enter some of the data in. It would be data entry, and she'd file it in one of our 2 rooms full of file cabinets. Now her position really is managing different information systems. So we've gone to, computer-aided dispatch with a full records management system, which requires, oversight and maintenance and, all the data entry that goes along with managing that system. But also we've added, 4 or 5 more officers during that time. She's also we have obligations as a city for oversight on the criminal justice information systems. And along with that is appointed positions of terminal agency coordinator in certain areas of responsibility from the BCA, compliance with the FBI, and a lot of other legal standards. So what went from a data entry position to now managing multiple information systems. And then as we've grown, we've had the police technician position, And next year, the possibility of, the other administrative assistant position, trying to go full-time there just to keep up with the data information stuff. We've scaled back the police technician next year, but that's obviously a role that we need to get filled in the future. So there's really been an evolution, significant evolution over those years. We did a brief update about 7 years ago, which was, some minor adjustments, formatting and cleanup, but, even since then, we've taken on more permitting as far as firearms, the different burning permitting, adding evidence management to some of the record stuff, which where the officers were responsible individually when we're smaller was feasible. It's not as you get bigger, you need more of a central management system. So adding in evidence management, adding the additional data that comes with the body cameras and managing the information systems that go along with that. And as we look forward with what's coming up in that position also prompted another look at this, is that we're gonna actually have to change records management systems. For the last 3 or 4 years, our developer that manages our records management system has stopped developing our system, and we're riding it out as long as we can. But there's gonna come a point where we're gonna have to change that. So we have that upcoming project, along with beginning to see what records look like for maintaining and managing fire records. We are also gonna have increase in the data management and redaction burden for the body cameras, other things like that. So you can see what started as data entry has evolved into really, kind of a records oversight management of multiple systems. And actually going forward, there's gonna have to be some project management and a little bit of guidance and leadership for the people in those roles. So as we stepped back and kind of looking at how does her current job fit, there was a quick realization that she's not doing the same job she was hired for. And we still have a lot of those functions necessary as well, which is why we see the full-time admin assistant in next year's budget. But that's kind of where this came out of. So we kind of made the tweaks according to where are we and what does the immediate future hold for that position. So we made those changes, sent it out, had it graded, and that's kind of what you see before you. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about it.
Any questions for Matt?
No.
That makes sense to me.
No interrogations today, Matt.
Sounds good.
Just to add on to Matt briefly, this is well overdue. I mean, Paula has been doing more than her job description for quite some time, so I just wanted to add that too.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2021-100 as drafted, amending the structure of the City of Corcoran Police Department.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And let's see here. Is that it, I believe? City council schedule? No, town hall meeting. I forgot to write that on my little form.
Yep.
Go right ahead.
So really, this comes from Mayor and Council, the mayor and I having a conversation about communication, engaging with the community, and the mayor asked about options, and we discussed a potential town hall meeting. For example, I was able to share when I was in New Brighton, it was a tradition that they had there. When I was there 10 years ago, they were having their 20th or 25th town hall meeting, and it was an event for them. So really is an opportunity for the council to decide or discuss whether this type of event would be good for Corcoran. And if so, what it would look like and who'd be doing all the work. I think if supported, I think my recommendation was, let's have a subcommittee of the council help plan this, because there's an awful lot going on the staff side. So I will note that I had a brief conversation with Councilmember Bodema, and I think his not quite verbatim answer was, good luck finding a day we're all available. But
Okay.
that was his brief discussion with me on that.
Yeah, that will be the tricky part. I've had several conversations with some residents who actually brought this idea to my attention and also said they'd be interested in help planning and getting the word out. So I think there's interest in the community for something like that, and I think it'd be a good event to people to come get to ask us questions. And
Where would we do it?
it's a question. Brad had a couple ideas.
Yeah,
Initial.
obviously with the remodel, we no longer have a community room, so it'd be working with probably one of the churches, Hope Community Church or St. John, or
Okay.
St. Thomas, something like that. Couldn't be here. I mean, technically, I suppose Public Works could be big enough. That's a lot of effort to move all the equipment, clean everything up. We do it once a year for, well, twice, truck safety seminar and night to night, and it's a lot of effort, especially if this potentially is in snowplow season type stuff. So I guess I'd like to not ask Public Works for a third time a year to have to get Public Works ready to go for people.
Well, why do people feel they don't have the ability to ask us questions the other 364 days of the year?
I don't know that they don't, but I don't know that that means this isn't a good opportunity for that.
I think it's us showing the initiative to reach out and try to get the feedback, too.
Yeah, but I mean, we have our information online. People can reach out to us anytime they want, via email, in my case, via phone. And I mean, you look at here, the public engagement right here, what we have. And this is really typical for the city of Corcoran meeting. Not what we normally see when we have a hot topic issue come in. So.
No one would be forced to do it.
Well, I'm not saying it's forced. I just don't think there's as much demand out there as we think there is to have something to this effect. Because if people want to find out what's going on, they have several avenues to find that information out already, or to ask questions for people. And personally, in the 2.5 years that I've been on council, I could probably count on my hand how many phone calls I've received from residents that aren't related to just a general specific topic that's on the agenda.
Okay.
So, I guess personally, I don't see the need to go and schedule one.
Okay. Fair enough.
What would a town hall meeting, what would be the subject? What would be?
Well, I think that's what we'd want to iron out and talk with people. I know some of the initial stuff that I talked to a couple of residents about was just, general upcoming plans, what's going on at the city other than just what they're seeing at this, the next packet they get a week in advance if they're checking that, as often as we are.
And we're talking one a year? Is that what we're talking?
I think.
Is there a way we could roll that into the Public Works National Night Out event? I mean, that's one time. Is there a way we could set up one bay to post the information going on? I mean, we just did it also at Corcoran Days. A number of us spent time sitting there talking to anybody that would walk up and talk to us and such. Is there a way to fold it into that National Night Out? I know we made trips all over the city this year and stuff, but it's a destination. Our Public Works is something we should be proud of and those kind of things. Is there a way to, hey, what's going on in the city? Here's the town hall. This is the subjects that most pop up, or we think is what you're thinking about?
Somewhat. So in years past, we actually have had tables. So for example, Tom Anderson, Sharon Meister were at a Parks and Trails Commission table. When we were going through the 2040 comp plan update, we had a land use and planning table. So we had several tables people at Public Works could meander around and get general information. There was no formal presentation or anything.
Right.
So it was a little different that way. But at any event we typically have, we try to have some information of what's going on. So it just depends on what level. There's a lot going on at night to night. So what's the focus? What do you want to accomplish?
How many events went on in the city? How many were registered on National Night Out?
For this year?
Yeah.
I think there were 8, 9?
8-ish?
8 or 9, yeah.
But typically, we had 19 at Public Works. The last time we were there, we had over 800 people at Public Works. So you talk, 12, 14% of the community coming out is about as big as you get. It's just from a staff perspective, it's all hands on deck. We're asking you, council, to drive around the community, typically. Maybe a couple of you get to stay at Public Works, for example, or at the end of the night, you're back. But that's a lot at the council, where are you going to be?
Well, and frankly, I'm happy to work on this, and I can continue working with residents I've talked to that were interested, and maybe we can put together a more specific proposal and bring it to the council, and we can decide at that point if they want
I'd be
to.
happy to jump on that too.
Okay.
I agree with Commissioner or Councilmember Schultz. I gotta get the terminology right, I'm still stuck in planning commission. I don't see a need, and a big subject that I've been involved with over the last 2 or 3 months is there's a significant sore spot. We don't have a community center anymore. So I just, while using a church and stuff is all great and stuff, we'd have to have a nice, clean agenda when people talk town hall meetings. What's the subject? Well, this is what's going on in your city and who's gonna speak to it, those kind of things. I'd love to be part of it and
That works great for me.
do some type of evolution on how we can get there, but,
Perfect. Does that work for you guys? Subcommittee, me and Council?
Yeah, I guess
Member
I
Veronica?
need to hear more about what the intent of it is,
Yeah.
because I think we do a good job of disseminating information in the city. I mean, the newsletter has information about what's going on from a planning perspective and what's been approved. You know, when we had our goal session, that all got disseminated to people in the newsletter and online and whatnot. So if we don't have something just specific to talk about, you know, I don't really see what we're all gathering for other than for coffee and donuts.
Okay. Well, I think we'll try to hammer out and bring it to the council, and if there's interest at that point, we'll go forward. If not, we won't. Perfect.
the town hall page in our thing that's mailed out once a quarter. Is that what we're doing it right now, once a quarter?
Yep.
I'd love to see it more, but
Yep.
there's a cost involved there too, but, and then the recent additions to the city council meeting minutes on Facebook and all of those things, I think we've done an awful lot, but, it can bring up some sour conversations related to, well, why are we meeting at a church when we could have had but we did this very responsibly, I feel, and I think it's a great addition to our city. But there's some sour grapes related to, we got rid of our community room, so.
Gotcha.
You brought up the newsletter. Do we have the option to subscribe to the newsletter electronically, like you can to subscribe to packets?
Pretty sure you
I
can.
believe you can. I'd have to double check on that.
In getting in lieu of a mailed option?
And we do have it on the website, but I am not.
Personally, as a resident, I'd rather subscribe to it
Yeah.
and not receive it in my mailbox.
I'm pretty sure it's an option. Same as like if you wanted to get the packets auto sent.
Yes, you can subscribe under the city's website if you
Okay.
want to. We haven't done a opt-out piece yet. We could certainly look into that as an option. It's just managing that, who wants in and who wants out, especially when people move and things like that.
They're not mailed with a physical address on them though, are they?
Yes, they have to have postal patron and the physical address on each one.
Okay, so they're not just a bulk mailer in that regard.
They're bulk mailed, but they have to have a very specific format for the.
So would we save money if we had an opt-out option?
Potentially, it's just managing the,
Yeah.
managing the database and
Yeah,
people in and out.
Maybe the cost of deducting 100 newsletters versus the staff time to remember which ones to pull
To
them out
pull
of
out, yeah.
the mailing list versus printing 12 pages for each one and moving on. Unless we get a better system.
Yeah, we could automate that somehow, maybe with a better system.
We can look at that.
Go to communications first and we could look into that.
There you go.
Did he just say if we had one?
Yeah.
Okay.
To Councilman Varenkamp's point, I mean, if that were to happen, maybe that's a good topic. Why did you just remodel City Hall? I mean, that probably would be a good topic to have at a.
I mean, I was fortunate enough to get your report in that, and what, is that something that you wrote that you're doing, or what's going on in the city? Is there a way to get that out too? I was pleasantly surprised, and it's like, I already knew he was busting his backside doing stuff around here, but, I'm just saying, the whole staff, everything that goes on, that was wonderful. I knew there was a lot done, and it was nice to get that summary, and is there a way that can turn into a summary too? citizens, the biggest problem is not everybody's gonna read it. It's just the city, they don't care about us. But I think a lot has changed over the last year or 2 years and such, and I think that involvement is growing significantly, so.
I feel like it'll be value add when we do it. We do have this format, obviously, but it's not really interactive. We intentionally don't set it up so that people ask the council questions about, what's the long-range vision of the city? What are you guys all about? What's been going on? This is all, it's very tactical, and it's related to what's on the agenda and what are we going to do about it today. So I feel like as we're trying to be intentional about setting a course for, say, 2022 with our goal-setting session, it would be great if we had just had 40 people show up and tell us what they care about
Right.
at a town hall.
Yeah,
And
and
that can shape the goals that we have.
I'm pretty confident that a few people that I have in mind that I've talked to about this before, that if I sat down with them and put pen to paper, we'd come up with a good list of an agenda to discuss. So I'm
I've met a few from the country too.
That'd be great.
So,
More the merrier.
you
Perfect.
can't move. Yeah, so I thought I'd get out of here.
Alrighty. So go forward with subcommittee of Counselor Varenkamp and myself. Figure it out from there. Perfect. Then we just have upcoming council schedule.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, a pretty big work session, fire service work plan. It's a gigantic topic for Matt to distill down to at least some information and a few actionable items for the 23rd. It's a big, big deal. And then we have a pretty big meeting as well. I'll note that with some luck, I will not be there, I'll be out of the area. But we do have a big agenda with Tavera Second Edition, Garages 2 coming back. If the Kirinimi sketch plan comes back, the public hearing for those nuisance code amendments, those are the changes to the code regarding RV storage. The sign ordinance update, that's a consent thing, calling some assessment hearings, draft garbage hauler license requirements, some early grading requests, a change order for the remodel, and then a couple of closed sessions on top of that. So some items might fall off, but we have a big remaining of the month, and then there is a bonus week, fortunately, between the 23rd and the first meeting in October. There's an extra week in there, so you'll get to rest after that.
Sounds good. Perfect. Anything else before we adjourn? All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, everyone.